Like, how long have you been racing? How did you get into adventure racing? I know you've raced on a number of USERRA, national championship top teams. Give us a little bit of your background.
My background is actually track and field and cross country. I ran in college at Central Michigan University. And then after college, I trained, Nike had an Olympic development program out in California at Stanford University. So I trained out there through Olympic trials. Unfortunately, I broke my ankle right before the last trials I attempted was 2004. And I couldn't get back into training and racing it. I was in a walking cast up until a month before the trials, and I missed it by a second. I just couldn't put it together. So like everybody, I think we learned a lot from watching Eco Challenge back when it was still on. And so we happened to be watching it. I was at a Nike training house, and I mentioned that I was pretty sure I could do something like that, and it looked really cool. And then one of my teammates said, my boyfriend does that. You should go on a race with him. And so I did. I did a 5-hour race with him, and pretty much hung up the track spikes about 6 months later. So it was a good transition to have something, still being able to compete in something when I knew I couldn't handle the track anymore with my broken ankle and stuff. So it was a good transition. And then, so by 2005, I'd say I was fully immersed in adventure racing. And here we are, I don't know however many years, 18, 19 years later, and still racing. And I don't know. I've been fortunate to have lots of opportunities to race on all kinds of different teams, and kind of been to I think I'm well over 100 races now, and I'm 47th expedition race was Spain. And I'm a little bit of a spreadsheet nerd. I've had over 69 teammates, so I can say I've bounced around on a lot of different teams, but so it's kind of nice to be a woman in the sport. We are in high demand, ladies. So teams are always looking for racers, and that's kind of how it's worked out for me so far. Been pretty lucky.
Very cool. So how did you end up with Team Orbital for Worlds?
So it was kind of crazy. I kind of had just accepted that I wasn't probably going to race on a Worlds team. No one had really asked, and there weren't any my normal team Bones that I raced with in the US, they weren't racing, and I was just kind of whatever. And then I was doing the Wilderness Traverse over in Canada, and while we were waiting to get entry into the pre-race stuff, a message popped up on my phone, and it was Yuan from Sweden asking if I was available and willing to race. And of course I said sure. And then I spent the next 12 hours while we were doing Wilderness Traverse panicking about what I had just committed to. But I've raced against Orbital. There actually used to be Silva, and they've been around for as long as I've been racing. In fact, Bjorn, I met him at one of my first international races. So it was kind of cool. I've raced against those guys a lot. We bumped into each other at races, and even on a race course, they're usually finishing right around the same place that whatever team I'm on is. So I knew what they were capable of. I knew they were a strong team, and it was pretty easy to just, not pass on an opportunity to race.
Yeah, very cool. So how much notice did you get that you were going to head to Spain?
I think I had a month, maybe 6 weeks tops. It was about the right amount of time to still be able to switch my training over a little bit to get, to focus on the world champs. With Wilderness Traverse going on, that was a great, unfortunately my teammate got ill in the race, so we only got through 12 hours of it, but it was a good, good workout. And then I did nationals, which was also a good 24-hour workout. And then that still gave me another 3 weeks of training to get ready for Worlds, which is kind of how I like to kind of fine tune my training, is usually the last couple of weeks before I head off to a expedition race. So timing was actually perfect.
Yeah, very cool. I know Chelsea indicated that was a big motivator for their team, the Bend team, to come to nationals as well. They were using that as sort of a final big training push before they went to Worlds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how did it go in terms of the team dynamics, racing with your teammates? Tell us a little bit about who you raced with.
Well, what's funny is I've had little conversations with those guys, but I had no idea their English was as amazing as it was. So it made that super easy. When I raced with Vitorade, they're from Brazil and Spain back in May, language is a little bit of a problem. Like they all spoke a little bit of English. Marco spoke really good English, but when things get tired, you're not gonna struggle with a language you're not comfortable with. So in that race, I heard mostly Spanish the whole time, and it was really hard to be engaged in the race. Like those guys are great, but I had a hard time knowing what was happening in the race. Whereas with these guys, they all spoke amazing English, and they were very considerate in the fact that even when they were like having a conversation between the two, like maybe Bjorn was talking to Yuan, if I was in the room, they spoke in English, even though it had nothing to do with me. Like it would have been fine speaking in Swedish. So it was all good. And so it was really easy to get to know those guys and have meetings and discuss, what we were doing and what our goals were and who's bringing what. Even as the race went on, they spoke English like 90% of the time. In the end, we had some navigation troubles, and I just told them, I'm like, guys, just work it out in Swedish. Like, you're tired, I'm tired. Don't even worry about me. Like, just whatever you guys need to do to problem solve what's going on here. But team dynamics wise, it was great. And those guys, like I said, were a little goofier than I thought they were. We all had a pretty good time out there.
Yeah, very cool. And now I know you posted in the forum, the race forum, in response to some shout outs and things that people had sent out, that you found yourself in a position that's super unusual for you, which was were they carrying your pack or you were on tow? How did that go?
Oh, I got the full helping treatment. It started off with that first opening 75-mile run. We were up there with like maybe top 10 teams, and everyone was just running. Like I don't know why we were running the uphills. It was just constant running. I think by the time I looked at my watch, we had been running for 5 hours straight. Like most of the time especially in an expedition race, you run, you walk, you hardly ever really, there's always a sprint at the beginning. I mean, let's all, we all know that happens, but then it kind of mellows out. But it was literally a pack of people. We just kept running, and it was like 4 Swedish teams up there, so they're all just chatting. And anyway, I could feel myself just starting to slip back. So next thing I know, my water bottles were taken out of my pack, and the guys carried those. And then next thing I know, a tow line comes out, and I'm like, oh, like, where do I put this? And so it was so helpful, right? Because even if I didn't so much as physically need the pull, it was just mentally helpful to stay engaged with the team, because mentally I wanted to just start walking. We get to this little hill, and I'm like, why are we running this? Let's walk this. Let's fast walk this. And I'd want to like start walking, and they keep running. So it was nice to have that little bit of a connection and pull me along. And then so that was through the first section, and yeah, my pack was off for probably a couple hours in there, off and on. Just I'd have these ups and downs where all of a sudden I wouldn't feel that great, and Bjorn would take my pack, and yeah, it was interesting, but it was it was good. It was helpful. I needed the help, and they were all feeling strong. So luckily that only lasted through the first trek, and then a little bit on the second bike, and then I think either the pace finally slowed a little bit, or my body just finally kind of clicked into place. But then I felt pretty back to my normal self. But it was a tough first, I'd say, like 40 hours.
If you need someone to mentor you on how to be towed, I'm your girl. I'm very good at that. You'll get to see Sarah doing plenty of that with me at the FIG. So someone asked a question, the offer of help from your teammates. So was that the way you described it just now, made it sort of sound like it was kind of unspoken? They just started doing it, or was there actually a conversation?
Well, I mean, it's funny because we had talked as a team before that, hey, we're not going to go out. We don't need to win stage 1. Like, that's not who wins the race. Whoever wins leg 1 usually doesn't win the race. And so our goal was to do our own thing, not worry about what everybody else was doing. But then here we are, 4 hours, we're still running, as a group. And so I just kind of said, hey guys, what's going on? Are we going to, are we going to keep pushing this pace? And they're like, yeah, we're good. I'm like, okay, cool, but I need some help because this is not working for me. And so then next thing I know, like I said, the tow line's out and offered to me, and and it's fine. But it was just kind of a little bit hard to kind of adjust to when I knew even now, I still don't think it was necessary. If you look at the top teams who was up there, Estonia did join us, and Swedish Armed Forces were, of course, in that mix. But, there were probably 4 other teams in that top group that we never saw after like day 2. So it's just kind of how it all kind of rolls out there. Sometimes that first day isn't really necessary. And it was so much pavement running that I think that took a toll on everybody's legs. I don't think I've ever seen so much. I probably run more pavement in this race than I have in all my races combined. You just don't usually see that. And I don't even know why the roads were paved. We were in the middle of nowhere and it was paved roads. So, it wasn't like we even saw cars on them. I think it was either just a way of maintaining them from, all the rain and things they get, or what. I have no idea. It was amazing. Normally you would love that, and it was fine on the bike, but not when you're running.
Yeah, right. So what was, I heard a lot of people talking about the pavement, and it seemed like that was pretty harsh on everybody's body. What was your favorite part of the course?
I'd say the paddle actually was pretty amazing. It was going to be tough for us because we knew it was going into night number 2, which is really risky when you don't sleep through 2 nights. Majority of my experience is things go wrong very badly, very quickly when you're pushing through that second night. But what was cool is we were in this big canyon, so you could kind of make out the silhouette of the walls. It was pretty peaceful in there. We had a little bit of a river flow, and we kept our boats tied together so that we could, stay in communication. And they started singing Swedish, like a Swedish folk song. So Bjorn was in one boat, he would sing one verse, and Robert was in my boat and he would sing the next verse. And they went back and forth. And it was just kind of a weird, kind of surreal, like, I don't know, it was really hard to describe, but I was just found myself just sitting there smiling, like, I don't know what they're singing about, something about a farmer and a cow. But it was really cool because they were just, proudly belting out the Swedish folk song. And it just kind of kept everybody awake. And it was just kind of a cool thing to be in.
That's awesome. So what kind of boats were you paddling?
We were in sit-on tops, which aren't the most comfortable and the most fun, but you could bring your own seats. And so we had pretty good seat setup. I spent, before the race, once I learned what kind of boats we were in, I have a crappy 8-foot sit-on-top boat. And so I switched to only paddling that instead of a nice sea kayak. So I spent some hours in that kind of a, crappy, slow boat. So it felt pretty comfortable. Robert is a super strong paddler, so he was with me. It was cold. It was definitely cold, especially since Robert and I flipped the boat in the first 10 meters when we entered the water. All the rain had made the river move a little faster than they think the race directors had explained to us. So we had a first couple of rapids that, it's in the dark, and when you turn on your headlamp, you can't see anything because of the fog on the water. So we were just basically paddling blind, and we hit a rock and flipped. So unfortunately, started out with my core pretty wet for, 55-mile paddle, but it could have been worse. And we did have to portage around multiple rapids, but it was kind of nice because it got you out of the boat. You could stretch, kind of move around again and warm up. So it actually went by faster than I thought it would.
Yeah. So then what did your pack look like for this race? My guess is you go a lot lighter than a lot of people would because you're planning to keep moving, but did you have extra clothes to change into, or how was your setup?
No, we carried, so the ARWS bare minimum is usually like one change of clothes, basically. You have another pair of tights and a long sleeve and then a mid layer in your rain jacket. So basically I had everything on. I had brought one extra long sleeve because I know myself and I know how cold I get paddling, that if I did get wet, I could swap out that base layer. And instead of a rain jacket, I actually had a spray jacket on underneath my rain jacket. So I had double water protection, which helped too, because, you're basically getting water poured on you when you're in the front of the boat from the guy behind you. So I think all in all, it was fine, but it was definitely helpful when we could get out and move around a bit. But yeah, we really carried as little as we could extra. I mean, even the whole race, we never carried more than 2 water bottles at a time. There's a lot of running springs and fountains throughout the communities that we crossed conveniently through every, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours, so we could easily replenish water if we needed to. But all of us carried pretty small, like 20-liter packs. I mean, it was quite nice actually, but I still, was quite grateful to hand off my pack, even though it really wasn't that big.
Yeah, so now you started with the huge trek, and then you had a big bike, you had the paddle. What came after that paddle?
So right after the huge trek was actually a shortish bike. It was like 50 miles. So I think it took us just right around 8 hours. Then after that was the big paddle, and then we had I think it was a 130-mile bike. So that was a pretty big bike for a race to start out with that many large legs. That was that's kind of unusual. You don't usually start out with a 76-mile run. So, for our team, it took us just under 24 hours. For a lot of other teams, it took, a day to a day and a half, even longer. So I think their fast estimate was 21 hours. And so I don't even know. I mean, I thought we were moving pretty well, and we ran mostly everything we could run. But I think that just started to wear on everybody.
Yeah, and now in the middle, was it in the middle of the big, huge bike leg that you had this orienteering section in town?
Yep. Then we had we came into the town of Lago, I believe. And we hit it right in the middle of the day. So it was just full of people and chaos everywhere. It was kind of cool. There was live music going. I found out that my Swedes really know American music quite well. We're like running down the street and they're like, "Hey, Dire Straits." I'm like, "What?" I don't even know Dire Straits. But it was kind of cool. And then we had to take photos at certain checkpoints that were behind this. It was really cool. It was this big, I don't know the history of it because it was all blur, but basically it was this almost like this gigantic fort in the middle of another town. And then within that, these like 20-foot brick walls was like a community. So that was one of my things I was going to look up as I got home to learn what it was we were running through. But it was full of cafes and people were eating and, everyone's having a normal time of their whatever day it was, Tuesday afternoon. And then here comes all these stinky adventure racers running around, yelling at each other, taking pictures. And it was interesting for sure.
Looked like it would
mix it up.
Yeah, it looked like it'd be a welcome relief in the middle of that bike ride, I expect. Yeah, and so then after that bike ride, did you go to another trek? Was that?
Yes, then we had a 40-mile trek that seemed like it would be, I think their estimate was like 13 hours. I think it took us 15 or 16. We had some troubles there. By then, what we had done is before that big bike, after we went through 2 nights of not sleeping off the paddle, we did stop at the next TA had a hotel, which is rare to have that as an opportunity, but we took full advantage and slept for 3 hours. I even took a shower. I mean, it was just like, because you almost felt terrible not like crawling into this nice bed in the state of that we were in. So we could take a little 2-minute shower and then slept hard for 3 hours. It was great. We got a little bit behind there because we still needed to work on our maps. And we had also learned, it was actually kind of a rookie mistake. They gave us 2 sets of maps, but 1 set wasn't waterproof. And when we were trying quickly to do maps before the race started, which they gave us like an hour and 45 minutes to deal with 52 maps, we had started writing on some of the ones that were not waterproof. So we had to redo our maps while we were at that hotel spot because the Sharpie had actually rubbed off and gotten wet. So that kind of put us, it wasn't supposed to be a 5.5-hour TA, but 3 hours sleep and then TA time and then just the chaos of the maps. It kind of put us a little bit later than we wanted to. But because we had slept then, we made it through the next night without sleep. And then the following night was during that, it'd be leg 5, and it was a big trek. We just started to get sleepy and just kind of goofy. We did the whole trek in the dark, which is also hard to do when you start at like 8 p.m. And then, I think we finished a few hours after sunrise, but it just made for a long night. We had to stop for some 20-minute naps. One of the best naps I had, though, we was freezing cold and wet and rainy, and we opened up a barn and there's like 6 cows just like looking at us, and they kind of freaked out because of our headlamps. But once we came in the barn and shut the door, it was so warm in there from the heat that the cows gave off that we didn't have to put on any extra gear. We didn't have to pull out our bivvies. We just laid down next to the cows in this little scrap of dry straw. And cows are going to the bathroom and, making all kinds of noise, but it didn't matter. We were pretty content just to take a little power nap in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And so then after that trek, you were back on another paddle? Was
Yeah,
that
so
where
we
you
came-
did paddle boarding?
Yeah, so we came off that trek, and I think we had fallen back into, we were like 5th and 6th place. We were within 5 minutes of each other. The Czech team, I think it was Black Hill, had caught us right at the end of that, and I guess I actually put on the water first, and the tide was going out. No, the tide was coming in, so we had a tidal swing coming against us. So it was a little rough paddle. You had to hug the shoreline up the river, and then when we punched out into the bay, there was kind of a tough crossing right where basically the ocean was trying to spill into this narrow river. And then because we were there in the daylight, it actually was kind of nice. I heard some stories of some scariness of hearing the breakers and feeling the tide at night was kind of rough. I know Quest had a hard time. But we were able to get through the paddle, but Black Hill had taken a slightly more aggressive route against the tide, but it worked for them. And so they started the final trek just maybe 5 minutes ahead of us. And so we were in 6th place with the intent that, hey, let's go catch Black Hill and maybe we can catch Aid because they were sitting in 4th and maybe only an hour and a half ahead of us. But unfortunately, on the last trek, things started to go pretty badly for us. My navigator, who had been so strong through the whole race, just all of a sudden was like, he started making little random mistakes, and I'd ask him like, hey, are you awake? What's up? And he always he'd always say, my mind is okay. I'm like, okay, great. So, and then we'd continue on, and then Bjorn was having a little bit of respiratory problem on the hills, but I just kind of felt our team was just starting to kind of fall apart. And that happens a lot in last sections of races. And we kind of were hoping that would happen to the other teams, that we had, taken care of ourselves and got decent sleep. But yeah, things just started to go backwards for us, and it got dark. And the next thing I know, another team went by us, and I'm like, guys, are we okay with this? We're getting past right now. And they're like, no, let's go. And then I was about to help Bjorn, and the next thing I know, Yuan just completely stops and says, I need to eat. I can't go on. So it was a really weird moment. And without ever knowing these guys, that was probably the first time, where it's kind of hard to, when you race with new people, was that I couldn't see this problem. Like I couldn't predict this problem was happening based on how they were behaving. Like I thought everything was fine, and then it wasn't. So next thing I know, Robert and I had emptied Bjorn's pack. We had emptied Yuan's pack, and Robert and I had the gear. And then Bjorn was trying to take the maps, and I was just trying to help Yuan keep moving forward. I mean, it was just kind of crazy. I'm like, what is going on? And I felt like we were just kind of wandering. And the last section it took forever. I think it was predicted to be like 6 hours. I want to say it took us like 10. And we crossed the finish line, and we ended up in 8th. And it was just kind of like, oh crap. Like, I don't know. I don't know how we didn't get passed by more teams, to tell you the truth, but it was a little bit of a shock. It was very disappointing, but it's kind of how it goes. Anything can happen out there, and you do what you can to keep moving forward. But unfortunately, it wasn't the finish I was hoping for, or any of us were hoping for. But the guys were so strong the whole time. I don't know what we could have really changed to help us get across the finish line better.
Yeah. So did you have a pretty good idea where you were in the standings as you went through the race?
So what they did to keep it fair is when you were checking out, you were allowed to see the check-in sheet from the previous TA. So like when we got to the TA, we didn't know, like maybe I'd see Swedish Armed Forces or Viderade, but I didn't know how long they had been there. But when you left, you could actually see the site of the sheet from the previous TA. So you knew who was still moving behind you, and then you knew who had left ahead of you. And they did that just to kind of keep, teams a little, just kind of keeping it fair, that the lead teams would, have an idea of when maybe the teams behind them had left the last TA. Whereas normally, only back of the pack teams kind of know, who's in front of them and how far apart we are. So we had a general idea. I think we were as high as 3rd place coming off the paddle. We stayed right around 4th and 5th consistently. And then, on the last trek, 8th place.
Yeah. So did you see these other did you see anyone other than the one team passing you? Did you realize you had slipped down that far?
I think technically, since we started that in 6th, we saw the one team that would have forced us into 7th. We never saw the other team, but we struggled with the second to the last checkpoint. Like, I had no idea what was going on. That's when I was like, guys, just speak Swedish, like, work this out. I was just helping you on, keep moving, and Robert and Bjorn were nabbing. And so I just let them all work it out. I have no idea what was going on. It was just kind of like, I call it the Twilight Zone. It was just, things were happening all around. You'd see some headlights, maybe you wouldn't, which direction they were coming. I have no idea. I was just kind of hoping and praying that we didn't drop past 10th, but at the same sense, it was kind of a shock to hear 8th, because we're just like, crap. But that's how it goes. Not over till you cross that finish line. So good for those other teams. But man, I was looking at the finish line photos, and the 2 teams that had passed us, they each had one teammate that was like basically being carried. So I mean, props to them for finishing and moving up a position or 2. Everyone I think was having some troubles out there.
Yeah. So what was you said that you all talked about your goals going into it. What was your team's goal? Did you have a goal in terms of placement?
Well, Orbital, they've been second multiple times, and they've been third. I think in the end, we really were hoping podium. No one really said the words, "We're here to win," but we all agreed, like, we're definitely a top 5 team. There's no reason why we can't be a top 3 team. And so we just kind of, I wouldn't say it was assumed, but we really thought that if we had a decent race, we would, work our way up there. But the race course was so, between the amount of pavement, and it was so not technical, like, we spent very little time off trail. It kind of catered to racers who, can move a little faster on those kind of conditions. And it didn't really favor to our strengths. I think we're a team that would do better with a little more technical, a little more, chances to have more route. There wasn't a lot of route choices, really. There were some small opportunities, but for the most part, it was pretty straightforward of where you needed to go.
Yeah. So someone asked in the chat here, she's wondering if this happens frequently, that men tend to go out harder in the beginning and burn themselves out, whereas women, whether it's because they pace themselves more or they just are built for endurance. Have you noticed any sort of
it's I think the common line a lot of times is the stories I hear is a lot of the women are pretty strong in the end compared to, like, they might need a little help in the beginning, but that guys have a tendency to fade more so towards the end than the women do. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I mean, some of the stories I've heard, it definitely seems true. For me personally, I'm always stronger in the end than I start. Partly I blame my age. I'm 45 now, and so it takes me a good 10, 12 hours before I feel good in the race. So, so this next race I'm doing is a 12-hour race, so we'll see what happens. I'll probably feel good when I cross the finish line. But it is, maybe because the guys went out a little bit harder, I don't know. I think it kind of varies from person to person, who was doing what. In that lead group that we were out, I'm like, looking around, and, a couple of the women had, like, either they were basically wearing just super lightweight race packs where they just had a little bit of water they were carrying. And, their guys must have had their gear. The Estonia woman and the woman from Swedish Armed Forces, they were both, didn't need any help, and both were carrying normal size packs. And then the rest of us were all on tow, the rest of the women. So it's just kind of, I think, how it goes, especially at the beginning of a race, where we just need a little bit of help to keep that pace that the guys want to run. And whether it's smart or not, to go out that hard or not, you could argue that either way. I personally thought it was a little bit unnecessary, but it kind of kept us in the mix too. It keeps the fire lit when you got teams right around you like that.
Yeah, right. So is there anything that you would do differently as you think back on the race?
I think when things started to go a little crazy during the leg 5, that big trek coming off the second, so we had 3 treks basically. So the second trek, it would have been like night 4. I think we should have slept longer. Sometimes 20-minute naps work, sometimes they don't. With how tired we were moving, we should have just slept for an hour. I think that would have made a world of difference, especially since we were in that nice barn with the cows. It was warm. if we would have just had a really solid sleep there, I think we would have got up and made it through the rest of that trek without having to stop again and just moved faster. It's just, you just kind of turn into zombies out there if you don't keep an eye on your sleep. And, you know, you can make up that amount of time just by moving a little bit faster when the section's that long. So that's that point I think we did wrong. And then just, you know, I mean, we lost a lot of time dealing with our maps, and I still think we started off, I don't think it was necessary to be running as much as we ran, because it kind of killed everybody's legs for that next bike. So, but you know, again, these are just my observations, and you know, I think the guys would agree with me on most things except for our opening pace. They still, even after the race, we had that discussion, and they're like, "Oh no, it was fine." I'm like, "Okay, then it was fine."
So do you think any of the issues that you had in that trekking leg were hydration or food related?
So it seemed to be a little bit of food problem, that Yuan was so into his maps that he wasn't eating. Again, I kind of blame myself. I'm usually pretty good at kind of keeping an eye on because I don't have the maps. I'm usually kind of keeping an eye on what everybody else is doing. And I actually was feeling good in that leg, but I was really more concerned that he was sleepy. I wasn't paying attention that he wasn't really eating. But he kept saying his mind was fine. So I think he was just, I mean, really through that whole race, I think he pushed hard through those first 4 days. Like, I mean, he was amazing. And he even towed me on the bike while he was navigating. You don't, you know, a lot of times the navigator isn't, you know, towing as well. And so I think he just pushed so hard that it was like, okay, my body's done. You know, I need a rest. I need a break. And unfortunately, we still had like, you know, 20K to go. And again, that's just kind of part of the game. You just, you know, how can we help him, and how can we keep moving, you know, forward?
Yeah. So what were your total sleeps then? Like, when did you take your first sleep, and what were your total sleeps?
So we tried to take a nap right before that long paddle, because we knew 2 nights was crazy. But unfortunately, even though we had the discussion, we're not going to sleep in a TA, we decided to try, and it was kind of quiet when we got to this. It was like a gymnasium. And we found this like storage closet where it was dark and where we thought was quiet. But once the next 2 teams came in, it just turned to chaos. So we slept 30 minutes there. And that actually would be another point of how I would do it differently. And we did talk about this later, that we should have switched to our kayak gear, gotten our boat, and then before we put on the river, just slept, you know, found a little warm place to take a little nap. And I think we would have felt better, or it would have been, you know, better quality time spent. So that was 30 minutes. Then we pushed through the rest of that night, or the whole night. And then we slept 3 hours at the hotel. And then we went through the whole next night on the bike, no sleeping. And then the next night, which would be night 5, we slept 20 minutes with the cows, and then another 30 minutes at another barn we found later on the route. So total time was 4 hours and 20 minutes for 5 nights of racing. So it might, I think that's about what most of the teams did. Veterade was crazy. Somehow they got through on 2 40-minute sleeps, which I don't know how that's physically possible. But like, I know Swedish Armed Forces had about 4 hours of sleep, I think. I didn't ask Nordic Islands what they, Estonia definitely fell apart in the end. I felt bad for those guys. They had a strong race the whole time. And then we were talking to them afterwards, and they were just talking about how their one guy that he went to the other side. That one guy described him as like a little mouse. He was just like, I was just like, oh man. So I think they had some troubles, and it could have been, you know, I don't know what their sleep was, but it was not enough for that team. But it's always the game. We always come in with a sleep strategy. It never works because you get caught up in the race. Depending on what the weather's doing, sometimes you have a place to sleep, sometimes you don't. It's about, you know, finding the right time and the right place to try and get quality rest, which that hotel stop was amazing. I mean, you could actually, that was probably the best sleep we could get. Swedish Armed Forces, I knew, went out and slept. I think they found a barn, or they found something out on the trail, but they carried sleeping bags. So they carried a little extra weight to make their sleep better out on the course, which is fine too. You know, it obviously worked for them. So they did amazing. But for us, yeah, I think maybe 5 hours would have been better than 4 hours and 20 minutes, but it is what it is. And for the last trek, even, it really wasn't asleep. Everyone seemed like they were awake. It was just like everyone was just physically exhausted, and your feet are just done at that point. I mean, it was literally 130 miles of running with a lot of that, probably 70% of that was pavement. I mean, it's just crazy.
So how often did you change your socks and your shoes?
So I have a rule that anytime I change my shoes, I definitely change socks. And then what we did in that first trek, we all carried an extra pair of socks and a tube of foot lube. And so we did take a break going through the first, maybe about, I don't know, 18 hours in or so. We finally decided let's swap shoes and socks, or swap our socks. And then we had a dry pair of socks again for that next the next big trek. So one of our 20-minute sleeps, we all decided, hey, everyone take off your shoes and socks. And when we wake up, new socks. And then in the end, we had to have our same wet shoes from the last kayak, but we brought dry socks to swap into. So I think we did all right on foot care. I mean, I think just in general, you can only do so much with what you did, between having wet feet the whole time and just that kind of a beating on the roads. A lot of it was just soreness, right? I mean, it's almost like you wanted to just, you were just praying for some sand or something soft.
Yeah. So what about your food? How much food did you take and eat and plan for?
We planned basically the fast estimates that the race director gave us on our logistics sheet. We planned for that plus like 2 or 3 more hours. What's interesting is Bjorn is diabetic. And so it was really interesting racing with him. He had to check his sugar. He was pretty good about checking it probably every 30 minutes to 45 minutes. He had a little reader, one of those automatic readers on attached to him. So he would just check his sugar. He's pretty good at telling, like he could tell when he wasn't feeling really well, and we'd have to make sure he got some food in him. So I think in the back of your head too, everyone kind of had a little bit extra food that just in case things went wrong, we could help Bjorn if he needed, a little bit of something to get him through. We didn't stop at any cafes. We didn't rely on any of that. We just carried what we needed and basically dealt with that.
And so how many calories do you take in an hour on average, do you think?
I mean, a normal person racing probably takes in about 200, anywhere from 100 to 300. I think 200 is kind of the average that you plan for. I'm like, I can get by on like 50 calories, but I think in the end it kind of catches, it might catch up with me, but I'm terrible at eating. When it's cold, that's when I definitely feel like I have to eat more. So I'd go in spurts where I would just constantly eat, either to stay awake or to keep my body warm. But I plan for myself about 100 calories an hour. But I know I can run a little bit lighter than some. Some of the guys I've raced with need a lot more than that. It's so different according to everybody and what, everyone has kind of different needs, I guess. But basically it's all about just constantly, snacking the whole time you're out there.
Yeah. And so is that how you do it? You keep kind of a steady. I tend to I can go for many hours with nothing, but then when it hits me hard.
Yeah. And that's when you're finally hungry, it's too late, right? You put yourself in a hole. So it's better to just constantly be taking bites when you can. And especially, keeping that variety going so that you always have something that you want to eat. The guys had these, I don't know, they bought them there. They were just like this bag of like kind of crazy gummy bears. But like the last 2 days, I'm pretty sure that's all I ate because that's the only thing that sounded good to me. And so like Bjorn would be like, Mary, I found more gummies. I'm like, yes. So I basically ate gummies and chocolate like the whole last day and a half. But it's just funny what you crave out there and what will work at any given moment. Right? Sometimes your throat gets dry, your mouth gets kind of sore from eating some things that sometimes dry crackers and aren't really going to cut it. But and bars and goos that I don't eat anything past like day one. It's just that kind of stuff never tastes good to me. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting race. especially there were definitely when we were running around Lago and the orienteering, I'm like running past all these little cafes. I'm like, oh, I could just go in and get a little sandwich. But I was like afraid to ask, you know, we didn't want to stop, and we were right neck and neck with Nordic Island. And I was like, ah. But sometimes those little 5-minute stops are worth it if you can get some real food in you. One of the best things that we found out there is that we kept going through apple orchards. So we were just picking apples off the trees, and that was amazing how good an apple tastes when you're racing out there.
Yeah. Yeah. See, you need to race with me and Sarah Dahlman. we stop and have breakfast, coffee. Can you wash our socks? I mean, yeah, we're not going to let a good cafe pass us by. So it's the price you pay for being at the top.
I've heard lots of stories, and Kate White, who's on here, I know they stopped at a couple of cafes, and I was just like, oh, that sounds amazing. I could have handled the sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the price you pay for being at the top. So what are some of well, let me ask first, what other countries you've raced in, and then I'm curious what maybe some of the challenges of racing internationally are that we might not have thought about or that maybe have surprised you over the years.
So I've raced in 19 different countries. And you know, it's funny, for the most part, it's been pretty easy. It's most people are, for the most part, know English, which makes us really lucky that communication is pretty easy for the most part. But food is definitely probably the biggest thing, especially pre-race meals is hardest for me when I travel. I'm kind of a picky eater. I always say that I probably eat like your 12-year-old son. I mean, that's kind of like my diet. And so when you go to another country, sometimes that's hard to try and figure that out, because either you can't understand the menu, or, you know, you don't really want to experiment too much before a race. So a lot of times I will bring, you know, probably a good 60% of my food if I can. And then, you know, it is fun to shop in other grocery stores and just be like, oh, this looks cool. I don't know what this is, but this looks super fun. And or you go around a store and you find where there's other kids and look at what they're buying in the store. And a lot of that stuff is similar to what you want to race with. So I'd say food is probably the hardest to sort out. I do remember I don't know, maybe we were in Brazil, and my teammate had his basket just full of cookies. And we crossed paths with this little boy, and he was just like shocked. You could just see like his face was just, I don't know if he was horrified or shocked or what at what Kyle had. And he was probably like, I've never eaten that many cookies in my life. What is this guy doing? But it was kind of, you know, you almost wanted to like give the kid some cookies, because I'm sure his mom was like, no. But for me, food is probably the hardest thing to kind of sort racing wise, but it also kind of keeps things interesting.
Yeah, that kid was wishing that he had Kyle and Mary as his parents.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, my parents would never let me eat all that junk food.
Exactly. He's probably like, what are they doing?
Whenever I go grocery shopping before an adventure race, I'm always a little embarrassed going through the checkout line. You always want to say, I don't always eat this way.
I've been asked at Walmart how many kids I had, and I'm like, none. This is what I usually just say, oh, I'm going camping, and that's usually my response. But yeah, they usually think I have like 4 children.
So Kate White asks a great question. Since you're not stopping at cafes and drinking lattes and some of the nice little luxuries, what do you do to keep moving and sort of encourage yourself when you get to the low moments? And she's wondering, especially when you're with teammates who maybe are new to you, do you rely more on sort of self-talk and internal stuff, or is it teammates keeping you going? How do you do that?
Absolutely, especially for this race. I felt a little added pressure racing with these guys, because 1, it was the world champs, and 2, I knew I was on a fast team. When I raced with Vitorade at Expedition Oregon, I knew we weren't going to have the same level of competition. I'll put it that way. So I wasn't really worried that if I needed to slow the team down a little bit or need a little bit of help, it probably wouldn't change the outcome. But this race, I was a little concerned of like, man, these guys are expecting you to be, you know, be up front, be on top, and we're going to, you know, race hard and be up front. So I was a little concerned. And so like day 1, when I was having trouble, I literally just had to put my head down and be like, if this is what it takes to be on the podium at the Worlds, then so be it. Like, I'm just gonna have to suck it up, and it's not gonna last forever. And you got to take it one piece at a time. And I knew if I could get through the trek, that I'd probably be fine on the bike. And I also knew that as the race went on for me, it would get hopefully better. But yeah, I mean that trek where we had to sleep with the cows and stuff, that was really hard because all four of us were having a hard time moving. We weren't moving as a team. Like, we were kind of spread out, and we were all sleepy. Like, we try and talk to each other, and the next thing you know, someone's like stumbling off the side of the road. And it's just like, it's really hard to motivate, and especially when they're not your normal team, right? Like, I might try a little harder when it's, I'm not saying I didn't try hard, but you have a different connection when you race with some of the same people that you're used to, that you've committed to. When I race with Bones, I mean, those guys, like, I know them so well, and I know it's like, I know they're relying on me as much as I'm relying on them, and it's a little easier to kind of rally and work together when you're tired. Whereas with the Swedes, it was a little harder. Like, I kind of felt like, be like, okay, I'm tired. What can you do to help me, stay awake? And meanwhile, they're struggling to speak in English because they're tired too. So it was definitely difficult. But yeah, Kate, when it came down to it, it was a lot of individual wars with myself that I had to just put my head down and push through. And if I was singing to myself, I was singing to myself. It's just like, it's just kind of how it works.
Okay, so it looks like we've got just about 10 minutes left in our hour, and I have kind of a personal question. We noticed that you're registered for the FIG 12-hour adventure race with Angel Simpson as a 2-woman team. So my first question is, have you ever raced on an all-women team before?
Nope. It'll be a first. I've raced on a couple of teams where we had 2 women and 2 guys, which is amazing how that changes the dynamics. But no, for the majority of the time, in fact, I think when I first started racing, I'm like, why would anybody want to race with all women? That's just stupid. But I've changed my ways, and I think if you get the right combination of women, and I think it'll be good. And yeah, I'm excited to race with Angel. I don't know if she really wants to race with me that much, but it's going to be fun. And I have done a couple of shorter races, and I've actually done some orienteering races with her and Barbara. So I've been on basically an all women team, but this is the first, I guess, official team I've been on. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. We'll see you and Sarah and whoever else is on this call out there. It should be a good time.
I would be surprised if you don't love it. It's just so different. So how did you and Angel end up pairing up for this race?
I met Angel in February through Barbara, and basically it just, I've been on some adventures with the 2 of them, and she had wanted to get out for a race with me, and we just kind of figured out that this one was perfect. And I know she knows how to navigate, so I'm not worried about that. So I think it'll be fun, and I'm excited that there's so many other 2-person women's teams. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have our own kind of race going on, and hopefully we'll take out a few of the men's teams along the way.
I would love it. She says, haha, of course she's excited. I don't blame her. Yeah, it's incredible to see the level of competition that we're going to have at the FIG this year is so amazing. And I'm sure you don't feel any pressure at all that, some of us are thinking, well, you all could win this thing overall. And how awesome would that be?
We'll see. I think it's definitely going to be anybody's race out there, but it's pretty exciting. I think it's amazing with this group and what you guys have managed to do. I apologize that I'm not on Facebook that much to pay attention and answer more questions and stuff, because I have a few tricks that I know, but yeah, it's pretty cool to see this group grow and see who's going to be out there for sure. I think at nationals there's like 3 or 4 all women teams. That's pretty cool. For how long I've been racing. Okay, for how long I've been racing, I've never ever seen that. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So what race plans do you have for 2022?
Right now, with Bones, we're gonna go to Panama in February. That's one of the first of the World Series. I'm kind of in this point of my racing now that I really want to race in countries I've never been to, and not. But because of nationals, we won the entry to Huaracinchi in Ecuador, have done that race 3 times, but Ecuador is such a cool, friendly country. It's so easy to travel to from the US. It's a pretty, I think this year the race is supposed to be actually more sea level type lowland racing, which is better for especially American racers. Usually you're high up, starting above 9,000 feet is usually like the bare minimum you're at. So it's kind of cool that it's more at sea level. So that will actually change things for the race and be a little bit better for non-local teams. But right now that's as far as I've gotten. I'm terrible at planning. Angel and Barbara both know this, that and it's just easier for me to race when a race falls in my lap. So you never know. If somebody asks me to race and I have the time, I'm probably going to go race. But right now I've only committed to Panama, and that's hard for me to do because it's in February.
Yeah. Well, so what does that mean? What will your winter look like? Do you take a break at all and let your body recover, or what do you do over the winter?
For the winter, especially, so it's kind of new for me. I've been hanging out in Michigan with my family the last 2 winters. I will spend a lot of time on my bike in the basement. I think that was before C2C this year. I watched all 23 Marvel movies in order, and that was my training. That by the time I got to the last one, I felt ready for Florida. But I pick a lot. I'll pick something to watch, and I just kind of focus and just ride. I think riding on a trainer in the winter is actually pretty good winter training. I felt pretty strong coming off of that. I've trained on the trainer when I was in Tahoe a lot, and then I'd go race in February, March in like New Zealand, and it's pretty hilly, and you feel like, man, all I was doing was sitting on a trainer. But what you're not doing is you're not coasting, you're not stopping at stop signs, you're not playing around on single track. You literally are pushing hard for 1 to 2 hours or whatever you do on your trainer, and it's actually pretty solid to come off of that. Paddling is usually the hardest thing for me in the winter. There's a couple rivers up here that don't freeze. It's just a matter of me getting my butt out in the water, which usually doesn't happen. And then running's easy. I run out on the groomed snowmobile trails a lot. They're pretty hard packed, and it's pretty fun to run on actually. So that's kind of my winter training. But I get kind of lazy a little bit. Most of the time, the rest of the year, I do a lot of landscape work and stuff. So I'm usually on my feet and always out and about. Whereas in the winter, it's really easy to sit down and forget about training and everything else. So yeah, winter's always tough, but that's why I like to start racing early, because it kind of forces you to have something on your plate to focus on and stay motivated. I feel like I already took a pretty good break. The FIG might be my first workout back. Sorry, Angel. I'm trying to train, but it's really hard. But I think that's kind of like what will re-trigger me into getting back into training again. Because I have taken a good solid 2 weeks off of nothing. We might even be on 3 weeks now. But it's good to let the body recover before you start doing more, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're almost at 9 o'clock, 1 hour. And so I'm gonna see if anybody else has any questions that they want to post up. Make sure everybody's got an opportunity to do that before we let you go. And yeah, wow, let me just say thanks. Well, people were thinking about that, for giving us your time tonight. You've made up for your lack of Facebooking.
Well, thanks for you guys for hearing me out here. I don't know if I entertained anyone, but it's fun to chat.